Hello, my name is JD and I blog over at uncoveringintimacy.com, and today I've got something a bit different than the usual fare. Last year for our 100th episode, I had my eldest daughter present her 4-H speech as I felt it fit the scope of the blog and this podcast. And this year she wrote a part 2 for her 4-H speech. She won at our local club and then placed second at districts, so we thought we'd record a version for the podcast again. Rather than give away any of the speech, I'll just let you read it. However, if you do want to go back and listen to part 1, I highly recommend it. There's a link in the show notes, or you can just look for episode 100. And without further ado, here's my daughter.
My daughter's been acting so weird recently. I really just don't know what is going on. Today, the school called me and told me they'll be using the name Michael on all her paperwork. I don't know what to do. I'm so sorry. That's so hard. Here, let me help. I've been through this already. Hello, everyone. Last year, I wrote a speech about gender ideology and transgenderism with regards to children. If you want to look it up, it's episode 100, or my dad will link it in the show notes. The speech was about how this is a prominent issue that you should be aware of and prepared for. I unfortunately did not have time to talk about prevention and what to do if your child does get sucked into this. Afterwards, I had so many people tell me they wanted to hear more, so this is a continuation of that speech. To give context to everyone here, I have been dealing with gender dysphoria since about the age of 10. Ages 13 and 14 were by far the worst for me. I had to decide to get better, rather than believe the people I met online who I, at the time, considered to be my support system. As a survivor of transgenderism, the advice I'm giving you today comes from things that my parents either did to help me or I believe would have helped me more. 1. Your kids have to know you love them. This is what will make the biggest impact. They have to hear it, feel it, know it, and believe it. The biggest reason I escaped this ideology is because I knew my parents loved me, honestly and truly. I was often counseled by those I met online to call Child Protective Services on my parents. If I didn't believe my parents loved me, I would have. If your child believes you love them, even if you fail in everything else, and they fall into the despair that is transgenderism, you can still have a relationship with them. That is why conveying that love is the most important thing you can do. 2. Don't put too much pressure on growing up. Puberty hit me rather early, quickly, and intensely. As a consequence of that, people either made it out to be a wonderful thing, you're growing up to be such a beautiful young lady, or an awful thing. I know, growing up is so hard. Neither was a good response. I never wanted to be a woman, and I didn't really believe I'd ever grow up. It was the childish belief of a 10-year-old. Think Lost Boys of Neverland. A belief most kids have, even if they don't realize it. So, when my body started changing and people started telling me it was a good thing, that was really invalidating for me. It didn't feel like a good thing, but sympathizing wasn't a good response either. It wasn't awful for me to grow up, it was inevitable. So commiserating with me validated my feelings in a way they shouldn't have been. The correct response is neutrality. This is simply a thing that happens to everyone. It isn't good or bad, it just is. The way the sky is blue, grass is green, and the sun will rise tomorrow. Every child will grow up. 3. Do not discourage questions or debate. Rather, invite them. Anyone who knows my dad knows he loves a good debate. He's always ready to go. Because of him, I grew up constantly questioning every little thing, and I'd get real answers. When I got a little older, we could talk about something for hours, just going back and forth. He never used his authority as reason to be right. Because of this, I knew when we had disagreements, his opinions and his side and his points were not invalid, even if I didn't like it. All this meant that when I was in the thick of it and we were arguing every day, I still couldn't discount what he said. What my dad said was going against everything I was being taught, and yet I couldn't let it go. And it's because he doesn't just say things. 4. Do not lie to your kids. Ever. Another large part of the reason I even considered listening to what my parents said was because they didn't lie to me. Ever. Even though I desperately wanted to not listen to them and believe they had something against me, I couldn't. I really only had two possibilities for what was going on to begin with. My parents were either lying to me, something they hadn't done before, or they believed they were right, in which case I would have to figure out who was wrong. Spoiler alert, it was me. Never, ever lie to your kids. Don't tell them half-truths and don't sugarcoat things to the point of dishonesty. 5. Own up to your mistakes. I knew my mom and dad never deliberately forgot something, they never tried to make me mad, and they never made me late on purpose. I think that goes for most, if not all, parents. Mine, though, try hard to let us know when they mess up and apologize. My mother always apologizes when she forgets things. She doesn't just brush it under the rug. My father does his best to fix the mistakes he makes. When I was younger, I got compared to my siblings, and when I made it known I didn't like it, they both apologized, and neither of them have done it since. They take responsibility for the things they do and say. I knew if my parents figured out they were wrong, they would apologize to me. At one point, I decided to just wait them out, convinced I was right, and they were wrong. 6. Homeschool your kids if you can, by any means necessary. Had I not been homeschooled, I would not have survived. I would have been even more surrounded by people telling me I was right, and I would have believed them. My teachers at school would likely have known me better than my parents. The lack of conversations and discussions that I would have had if I wasn't around my parents all the time means I wouldn't have shared their values. My parents wouldn't have known me as a person like they needed to. My parents know me better than anyone else, and they should. You should know your child better than anyone else. When I was unsure of myself, my parents were sure for me. They knew who I was when I was still trying to find myself back. This is a crazy world we live in, and your child will almost certainly lose themselves. It is up to you to know your child, to be sure for your child. It will save them when they don't think they need saving. Okay, so all you're saying is your kids need to believe you love them, don't put too much pressure on growing up, encourage questions and debate, don't lie to your kids, own up to your mistakes, and be careful about who's influencing them. That makes sense. All these things do seem like they'd set me up for a higher chance of success. I'll have to figure out how to implement this. I know you can't give me a handbook. No one knows my kid like I do. Your children need you now more than ever. You need to be reliable and understandable, a break from the nonsense that is our world. You need to be their peace, the calm in the storm. You need to bring normalcy. Even if at home it doesn't feel like it. Even if you're fighting and arguing every day. Do things together, eat together, say goodnight. Tell your kids you love them. These things, however simple they may seem, will keep your family together. And what more could you possibly ask for? I thank you for your time and consideration.
And that was my daughter's speech. If you liked it, if you have comments, if you have questions, you can head over to the blog post and just comment below. You can do so anonymously. I will share all the comments with my daughter, as she gets a lot of encouragement and support from seeing people's reaction to it. It's really what made her do a part 2 this year. If, on the other hand, you want to argue and debate, that's okay too. Head over to the comment section. Both me and my daughter are up for that kind of discussion as well. And that's it for today. We'll talk to you next time.